What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I am putting out on the YouTube channel, including the beginning of Season 3 of My Soccer Story. I'm going to run through a few things here, some of the biggest stories from over the weekend, all of them across the pond in Europe, starting surprise, surprise, with the North London Derby. It is Arsenal who come away with a 3-2 win to continue to put pressure on Manchester City. That is the biggest takeaway, the biggest consequence of this result. We're also at the point with Arsenal where they simply just need to find ways to win every single game they play. There's not too much to analyze here because they just got to get 3 points on the board and hope Manchester City slip up somewhere. So I do want to focus more on the Tottenham side of this after kind of going through the game a little bit. First half, it's 3-0 Arsenal. It's set pieces, a real strength for Arsenal that had not been as much of a strength recently, and a real issue for Spurs. You put those two things together, massive advantage for Arsenal there. Then you get the counterattacking goal from Bukayo Saka after two correctly waved off, in my opinion, appeals for Spurs penalty. Saka comes right down the field. That was a ridiculously good first touch, and he gets it onto his left foot. You know what happens from there. It's 3-0. Looks like Arsenal are going to cruise, and it's not like there was some furious rally in terms of Spurs completely took the game over in the second half. Look at the goals. The first one is David Raya. I guess he was trying to clear that ball. It didn't look like he was hitting it trying to pass it to somebody in particular. I don't know what happened, but it's another horrible mistake from him. If I'm Mikel Arteta, I really got to think about my goalkeeping situation over the summer. This is my big pet peeve with goalkeepers. I don't care how many great saves you make. I don't care how many points you win by keeping the ball in the net when it should be going in. When you throw away goals like this, I just have a really, really hard time being okay with that type of goalkeeping on a team trying to win a Premier League, trying to win a Champions League. And then the second goal, a little bit unfortunate. Declan Rice was going to clear the ball and got there too late. Ben Davies got the worst of it, for sure. Definitely a penalty. I don't know that there was much Rice could do about it. Davies just got there first, credit to him. Won the ball, and so there you go. Son makes no mistake. It's 3-2. Arsenal do ultimately hold on, though. But again, this is kind of self-inflicted mistakes that even made this game interesting. Credit to them for not completely unraveling because they needed these 3 points and they got them. The one thing I want to say on the Spurs side of this, and it was more pertinent when it was 3-0 than the 3-2 in the fight back that you saw, even if it wasn't the most impressive performance to get those two goals. But I said from day one when Postecoglou was hired, before you worry about anything in terms of moving up the Premier League table, evolution of style of play, the first and most important task is to get the toxicity out of this club, to rebuild the relationship with the fans, to make this fun again. Because if that doesn't happen, none of the other stuff is going to happen. And Postecoglou has held up his end of the bargain for that. And I said he might not be the guy to take Spurs where they ultimately want to go, but he is the perfect guy to get everybody back on board. And they have all this success early. He wins a bunch of Premier League Managers of the Month awards, and everybody's all on board. And then, over time, the risks that come with playing the way Ange Postecoglou plays have started to reveal themselves. This was always going to happen. And it's not so much in this game because set pieces were the biggest issue. But I wanted to just take this to talk about this generally. Spurs are still very much on track to finish fifth. This should be a top 5 finish. And no, that's probably not going to be a Champions League spot in terms of where they finish and what that spot ends up being. Arsenal didn't help them, City didn't help them, Liverpool didn't help them, and Villa have done enough to keep hold of that 4th spot, and obviously losing here doesn't help either. So it looks like they're going to finish 5th. Go back to August. If you would have told Spurs fans, you're going to finish 5th, you're going to have key injuries for significant portions of the season where some of your best and most important players are not available. Not a few games, but we're talking months. 6+ weeks. And you still finish 5th and are fun to watch? Everybody would have taken that. And that's what Postecoglou delivered. And so now there's this section of the Spurs fan base that is, at least, it seems like, weary of or critical of Postecoglou's refusal to do anything but plan A. And to me, that's not the issue here. Because you can say ultimately that's just not going to work at the level it needs to. And maybe that's true. But you don't know that yet, because this season, relative to expectations, was an incredible success. Even if it has ended in somewhat disappointing fashion. You can't let the fact that they started so well taint how things have gone since. Because if you do, that's just a testament to how much you believe in Postecoglou and how much credit you're giving him. Because now all of a sudden, he showed you what he could do. So now you're expecting him to go keep pace with Liverpool and City and Arsenal. That's not who they are. That's not the team that they have, the squad they have. So to me, this whole conversation about, and obviously this is what fans do and this is what happens, but it's premature. If you're Spurs and a Spurs fan, you got to just keep believing in this until you're given a reason not to. And by that, I don't mean it not working, because it's not going to work sometimes. It's going to be ugly sometimes. And it's going to be amazing other times. It just depends on the day. This is the good and the bad. But it has gotten Spurs to a point where nobody thought they should be this season. So you got to keep riding with it. And again, you might have believed from day one that Ange Postecoglou is not the manager to get this team from Champions League hopeful back to Pochettino era, where it was, can they compete for a Premier League title? They're consistently qualifying for the Champions League. You might just say this style of play can't do that. Obviously, the season didn't prove you wrong, but it was never supposed to. And that's the point. You got to give Postecoglou the opportunity to actually have a team where Champions League is a realistic expectation. And if they stay healthy and have a good summer transfer window, that's probably going to be next season. Then you can start having evaluations about whether this is the way to go, right, wrong, whether he should have this job, all of that. But he's still overachieving right now. No matter how you feel about what he's doing. He's getting the job done, and then he's doing even more. The fact that they lost this North London derby doesn't change any of that. The way the season has ended, or is ending, doesn't change that. Second, we have a Women's Champions League final. It will be Barcelona and Lyon. I brought this up time after time. Here's another opportunity for Barcelona. They're the best team in the world. They have had the luxury of facing teams other than Lyon in the final and collecting Champions League trophies as a result. Not saying they would never have beaten Lyon, but look what happened last time they played them. And beating England in the World Cup final for the Belmontes, the Putellas, the Salma Paralluelos, the Spanish core of this Barcelona team. They finally got that signature win in a final where you feel like you faced the best opposition that you could. For the Barcelona team, with some of those England internationals, the non-Spanish players on this team, still haven't done that. They still have not cemented, and it matters for them more than everybody else because they play in La Liga. Because they don't have a PSG if you're Lyon. They don't have a Man City and Arsenal if you're Chelsea. They don't have the domestic opponents. And so they're judged by what they do in the Champions League. And obviously, I mean, they're undisputably the best team in the world. But they have to beat Lyon to cement that. And so they get another opportunity to do so. Now, the other part of this is the way that they got here. They lost the first leg at home to a Chelsea team that is banged up with a manager that's leaving. And then the second leg, it looked, you're kind of thinking after that first leg, maybe Emma Hayes has some magic here as she's departing, and Chelsea's going to find a way to do this and finally get her the Champions League trophy. And then everything that kind of went right in the first leg goes wrong in the second leg in terms of just bad breaks. Chelsea hit the post. Obviously, the Khadija Buchanan red card changed the game. That is not a yellow. It's a really unfortunate. I mean, you can go look at what Emma Hayes described it as. She clearly felt very strongly. It's just a really unfortunate call. And then the penalty, I don't think it's a penalty either. Those two kind of combined to change the game, and Barcelona come away with a 2-0 win and advance to the final. And so Emma Hayes doesn't have her Champions League and is just kind of left wondering what could have been if some of those breaks go their way. Because this is not, they're not supposed to be beating Barcelona, but they had Barcelona on the ropes. They had this tie there for the taking. And if they can do that to Barcelona, you got to at least give them a chance in the final. And they couldn't, unfortunate, and couldn't get the job done. Unfortunate, refereeing decisions that kind of went against them. And so, no Champions League for Emma Hayes. And to me, this is one of the toughest ways to exit, is feeling like you were right there, that you had the opportunity, and who knows what happens if you can get past Barcelona. But you never get that chance because Barcelona, as they always seem to do in the Champions League, find a way. Finally, a couple other Premier League things I want to touch on real quick. Promotion relegation related. Leicester City promoted. As I am recording this, they still have not clinched the championship. That can be done in less than 24 hours from when I'm recording this. But they have clinched automatic promotion. I am bringing this up specifically from a financial fair play point, because this is a really important conversation within the profitability and profit and sustainability rules conversation. Nottingham Forest got their points deduction essentially because they went out and bought an entire new team when they got promoted and had a bunch of loanees, so it's not like they sold a bunch of high value players to do this, right? They just completely rebuilt the thing. It is very easy to see how they could have run afoul of PSR. Everton, you know, mismanagement, stadium situation, bad evaluations, not selling all that many players outside of Richarlison and Anthony Gordon. It's not all that hard to see how they ran afoul of PSR. Leicester's situation is different. And that's why I wanted to talk about this for a minute. Because Leicester's argument basically is we were spending at the level of a team competing in European competition because that's who we were. Out of nowhere, inexplicably, we got ourselves relegated. That probably is the best team to ever go down, at least in the Premier League era. And they sold key players and let a bunch of other key players who were out of contract go. Now, should they have sold Yuri Tillmans when they could have before he walked for nothing? Yeah. But he was still a huge wage earner that was no longer with this team. But because they had this squad that was supposed to be in the top half of the Premier League, they've still got all these, guys who have played in major tournaments for high-profile European countries, and Jamie Vardy, and then you go buy Steffi Mavididi and Harry Winks. And somehow they still have evidently violated the PSR rules. Either you did or you didn't. That's really not the conversation here, because the numbers are the numbers. They don't lie. But if you go back to the last few transfer windows, it's not like Leicester have been spending lavishly. It's a different conversation once you're preparing to go into the Championship. And, they did spend significant money, but also they sold James Maddison, they sold Timothy Castagne, they sold Harvey Barnes. But we were at a point where Brendan Rodgers couldn't bring a player in until the Wesley Fofana Chelsea deal got done. And I say all of that to say basically this. However you feel about the PSR rules, the way they're being enforced, the punishments, whether you think it's fair that Leicester had this good of a squad in the Championship and came right back up, because that was clearly, they were betting on the ability of this team to get back up this season. Because now with all of the noise and the focus on PSR, who knows what happens if they had to go try and do this again. I find it hard to believe they could keep this team together. They had to get this done on the first try. It looked like they were going to cakewalk through the Championship. Then it fell apart for a while. They found a way to regroup and got the job done. So you can look at this and say, hey, that's called ambition. I admire their refusal to just kind of give in to, the way that they're fighting these PSR violations, and the fact that they really committed themselves first to spend in a way that allowed them to compete with the best teams in the Premier League and to be in European European competitions, and that they were determined to go straight back up. You can look at that and say, hey, that's what I want the owner of my favorite club to do. I want the ambition. They spent the money they needed to in order to get the job done. Wasn't pretty, but they got it done. On the flip side, you can say that this is reckless, a violation of the rules, and that they should be punished severely for it. Because what if it doesn't work? You're not supposed to be able to build these kind of teams in the Championship. So it's this philosophical conversation about when you get relegated and you're Leicester, you're Leeds United, you're Southampton, these bigger clubs, what are you allowed to do? Who gets to punish you? How is this all evaluated? Because the other part of this too is that Leicester are going to get punished next season when the other teams that violated them at the same time period are getting punished this season. For reasons that because nobody seemed to really have an answer as to how you punish them. To me, this is just it's an important part of the PSR conversation because it's a completely different aspect of it. It's because you look at this, you go, it works. So why wouldn't other teams try this? If you're, Burnley, Sheffield United next season. Is this good? Is this bad? Should it be punished? You can have your different opinions. But I just want to, because we're talking so much about Everton and Forest because they're in the Premier League, I wanted to bring Leicester into this conversation because, to me, this is the other side of that. Is how do you also navigate the changing of leagues? And the idea that some of these teams that come down are going to have, maybe not this caliber of roster, but really good rosters through no particular faults of their own. It's not like they spent a bunch of money in the championship to build them. Leicester did what you're supposed to. They sold key players. They let a bunch of guys walk. They had to regroup. And still, a lot of these losses came the seasons before when they really tightened the purse strings. And it's just a very interesting part of this conversation to me, so I wanted to bring it up. But Leicester City, first team back in the Premier League from the Championship. The second thing, on the other side of this, Everton have avoided relegation again. I'm going to take this opportunity to once again give props to Sean Dyche and wonder why we're not giving him more credit. He took a team that was barreling toward relegation. He kept them up. He then got handed not 1 but 2 points deductions, navigated all of the uncertainty surrounding that, and kept his team up with games to spare. They are playing really well right now, picking up points left and right. Oh, by the way, he also went in there and effectively ended Liverpool's title hopes too. And it's a very similar thing to Ange Postecoglou for me. Maybe you just don't feel like Sean Dyche is capable of taking this team where ultimately Everton should be. And that's fine. But you can't tell me there was a better manager, a better hire that could have been made. And I said this at the time, and have been proven right. When Everton hired Dyche, he has done everything you could possibly ask for without getting any kind of major financial help here, right? This is very similar to the teams that he inherited from Frank Lampard. It is still Dominic Calvert-Lewin and James Tarkowski, and you can go down the list. Seamus Coleman, Dwight McNeil, etc. The same guys that collectively we didn't seem to think were good enough. And their play under Frank Lampard suggested they weren't good enough. He has continued to make them better and better and better. Right? This season was an improvement upon last season. I just give him all the credit in the world for being willing to take this job, to accept the challenges that have come with it, and to just get the job done. Because similar to Leicester, and maybe even more so because of the stadium situation, what in the world would have happened had Everton gotten relegated? Maybe they could have survived one season. Maybe. But it could have dramatically altered the course of this club moving forward over the next decade. They could not afford to let it happen. And even with all the disadvantages he was given, Sean Dyche delivered not once, but twice. And they have been much better this season than they were last season. They're not good to watch. They're not particularly good compared to the rest of the Premier League. But again, measuring against expectations, he has done a phenomenal, phenomenal job. He can manage my club any day. And what he's doing with Everton is exactly the reason why. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.